So this week we're starting chapter 4 with job analysis. So the first part of our class, I would describe that as more abstract, more theory driven. Chapter 4, we start getting into the nuts and bolts of what you do when you work in HR in terms of compensation. So job analysis is sort of the basis of lots of the decisions we'll make in later chapters around compensation systems. So job analysis is the systematic method to discover and describe differences and similarities among jobs. So it's a process that we can be involved in frequently or not as frequently in order to figure out what are the differences and similarities among jobs. And the differences and similarities among jobs is important, at least in terms of compensation, because it helps us determine how we're going to compensate each kind of job that we analyze in our job analysis. A job analysis results in a job description that lists the tasks, duties, and responsibilities of a job, the observable actions of a job. Or we also get a job specification, which tells us the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics, or KSAOs, that are needed for an individual to perform the job. The job description is focused on the job itself. So what does this job look like? What are the tasks that are part of this job? And then the job specification is what kind of person has the ability to do this job? What do they need to have? And that means it's focused more on the person that would fill that job. So the most common approach is the job-based approach. That means our job analysis is going to be focused on the tasks that are in jobs rather than on the kinds of people who fill those jobs. But we'll look at the people-based approach in a later chapter. A job analysis provides us information for an internal structure of jobs in the organization. So you can think of like a job hierarchy, for example, an organizational hierarchy where we can see who supervises whom within this hierarchy, with the idea that people at higher levels of the hierarchy have more responsibility and accountability than people at lower levels, etc. It also identifies the job content, so what are the tasks that are part of those jobs, and then serves as input for job descriptions, which we just defined, job evaluations, which we'll talk about in a later chapter because that's part of determining compensation across different jobs, and job structures. We have a lot of major decisions we have to make in a job analysis. First, we have to figure out why are we performing this job analysis? In this class, our primary objective is going to be for either updating a compensation system or creating a new compensation system. If you're in an organization that might be fairly new and may not have an existing compensation system. However, there could be other reasons that we do a job analysis, such as updating our performance evaluation process, for hiring for new jobs that we need to create in the organization, etc. All of these different kinds of functions that you might use the job analysis for will require different kinds of data. So we have to keep that in mind as we figure out what our process is going to be for our job analysis. We then have to figure out what kind of information we need. What data do we need to collect? How should we collect that data? Should we be talking to people individually in interviews? Should we be having them fill out questionnaires? Some of this will depend on what the positions are. Can you observe what people are doing, for example, quite easily? Do you have a lot of them to do? Do you have to analyze hundreds of jobs or dozens of jobs or just a few jobs? Depending on how you want to do the job analysis in your organization. The fewer you do, the more you can do things like interviewing people and observing their work. The more you have to do, the more you might have to do quantitative analysis where you're asking people to fill out surveys because you just don't have time to talk to everyone. You also have to figure out who has to be involved. Usually it's job holders and supervisors that are giving you information, but that may change depending on the positions you're looking at. You may also have to determine who's going to actually be part of the job analysis team that's doing this. Is it going to be certain people in HR? Are you going to have new employees do this? As our book talks about, in some organizations, new employees are asked to do this to learn about the organization, but often that makes this process a little more tedious because one, this person has to learn how to do the job analysis. Two, they don't have any background information. And three, they may not actually know how to do a job analysis. So you have to teach them how to do it properly. And that means someone also has to be checking their work. And then you have to think about how useful are the results for the purpose that you have for your job analysis. If you're getting data that's not useful for the purpose that you have, then it's not a very useful process to go through. So why are we performing this job analysis? A job analysis, as I gave some examples for, can be useful for almost every major HR function. Almost everything we do, a job analysis is the basis of that. But that means the data that we need for each of those functions can be quite different. Internal structures are based on job-related information. So when we make, for example, our organizational hierarchy based on a job analysis, that actually provides information to both managers and employees about why there are pay differences in that structure that are related to the kind of work people are doing. So if you're higher up in that hierarchy, you probably have more responsibility. You're supervising more employees and projects, that sort of thing. You're going to be paid quite differently than someone lower down. But you also can then see how maybe jobs are grouped together, and why those different job groupings are getting paid differently across even the same level in the hierarchy. And for compensation, the job analysis specifically is used for establishing similarities and differences in work content of jobs. And that's so that we can figure out why we're paying some people more than others for tasks that they do that are more important to the organization. It also helps us establish internally fair and aligned job structures. And if you recall from past chapters, that fairness or justice is really important. So we want distributive justice or fairness, which is how much people are paid, but we also want procedural justice or fairness. How are pay decisions made and how transparent are those to employees? So in a job analysis, we're going to have some different procedures that we go through, and we'll have different levels of analysis. So that's what I quickly wanted to go through before we go through the rest of the chapter, because you have to determine what that level of analysis is going to be before you start. Our job analysis usually collects information about specific tasks or behaviors, so things like interviewing job holders about what they do or observing them doing their actual jobs. The task is the smallest unit of analysis we can use for a job analysis, and it tells us exactly what people do in their jobs. So something like I could say right now, teaching students who are online might be something I do in my job, but then a task might be creating PowerPoint slides to show students concepts from the class or content that needs to be covered in the class, that sort of thing. You can group similar tasks into task dimensions. So something like preparing class materials might be something like creating PowerPoints, worksheets for activities in class, other sorts of things that you would do in a class. That could be a task dimension, creating those things, but the specific task might be something like creating a PowerPoint slide deck that shows the content for that specific chapter of the book. I also wanted to tell you, to talk to you about positions versus job families, because this is really the level of analysis that you have to determine in writing your job descriptions, and also how you're going to create your compensation system. So the smallest unit here is a position, and that's the group of tasks performed by one person. So I gave you here my position. My actual job title is Assistant Professor of Management. That's the position that I fill. In the group of tasks, we actually divide them up in academia into teaching, research, and service. Service is things like working on committees, working with student organizations, that sort of thing. You can move one level up to something much broader, which is a job. A job is when identical positions can make up a job. So a job could be professor. Let me give you an example, and I don't know how many of you will know these differences. So if this doesn't mean anything to you, I'm just trying to help you figure out how to think about this in your head. So we might have professor as a job. My job position is going to be assistant professor of management, but other instructors' positions are actually instructor. So an assistant professor, part of their job is research. So in fact, 50% of my time is on research, 40% of my time is on teaching, and 10% is on service. Instructors do much of the same work, except 80% of their time is spent on teaching and 20% on service. They have no research component. That also means their job position or job title is quite different, and it tells you that there's a difference in the kinds of tasks that people do in these jobs. However, we both teach, so you could put those two job titles or positions together into a job of professor. And then if you went one level up above that, you could have a job family called academic faculty. And it could include lots of people like assistant professors, instructors, adjunct professors. It could even be people like who work in extension, who aren't formally professors teaching traditional students, but they're going out in the community and helping to teach people who are part of the community or part of the public, but aren't necessarily students who are getting a degree or part of a degree program at the university. So that's the difference between position, job, and job family. And what level you do your job analysis at will depend on how similar and different the jobs in your organization look.